When we first start developing our projects, where should we start? That's the exact question we're going to answer in today's lesson. Rhetorical scholars often start their projects by closely examining their text, that persuasive object that is the focus of their study. We often call this first critical step close reading, which is all about getting to know our text and understand our text more deeply. And so, close reading or close textual analysis is the mindful and disciplined reading of our text to understand its meaning and its rhetorical functions. And so, I'll break that apart a little bit. By meaning, we just talked about what is this text all about? What does it mean? If you've ever gone past a billboard and just wondered, what the heck is that billboard doing there? What is that all about? This first step of close reading is about figuring that out. What is this thing here for? What is it trying to communicate or convey? The second part is the rhetorical function. And so this is just how does this thing attempt to influence us? How is it working to persuade its audience? And so, for example, repetition might serve a particular rhetorical function because repetition can help build momentum towards a conclusion. Repetition also helps make that idea more memorable for an audience. And so, in that case, repetition might serve two functions there to make the speech more memorable and also to build momentum in the speech. And so in this lesson, we're going to talk about 3 steps that you can take at the beginning of your study in order to do close reading and have that close reading serve you with the most impact. So our first step is just the textual analysis step. This involves us carefully reading through our text several times, maybe even more than several times, so we understand all the aspects of the text. And so our goal here is to first identify certain things in the text. So is it a narrative? Are there metaphors? Is there repetition? What kinds of evidence is being used? And so we're trying to identify what's going on with those kinds of questions. This is often referred to as our evidence gathering phase. And so when we see key metaphors or the evidence, right, we are saving those quotes, remembering those quotes, highlighting those quotes. And so we remember to use those quotes later on as we actually analyze the text. At this stage, we can look for 7 different things in our text. The first thing we can look at then is the purpose of the text, or how does the text or the speaker represent what they're trying to accomplish? How do they represent their goal? We can also ask questions like, is that goal clear or is it vague or murky? Does the person have multiple goals? Second, we can ask questions about the persona, and the persona is how the advocate, how the speaker is representing themselves in their text. For example, if the president gives a speech, they might refer to themselves as a dad, they might refer to themselves as the president. And so, how they're representing themselves as either the dad or the president is their persona. So, what kinds of personas are the speaker or the advocate of your text taking on in the text? And a related question is, how is that speaker developing their ethos? Next, we can look at questions of audience, or who does the speech or the text look like it is trying to persuade? From there, we can ask, how does the speaker, the retort, the text portray the audience? How does it encourage the audience to view themselves? In a lot of different speeches, there are things like, as fellow taxpayers, we believe this, or as fellow parents, we believe this. And so in those cases, the person is representing the audience as either the taxpayers or the parents. And so, how does the speaker encourage the audience to view themselves? After that, we can start thinking about tone, or what emotions are being invoked or conveyed. Is the speaker look angry? Does the speaker look depressed or happy or hopeful? We can also ask, how is the audience encouraged to feel? So we're thinking about pathos here. We can also ask questions about structure, or what form is the text? Is this text a speech? Is it a blog post? Is it a YouTube video? Is it a letter? Those kinds of questions. We also start to ask questions about, is this a narrative or is it more an argumentative based appeal? If it is an argumentative based appeal, is it developed chronologically or from past to current, or does it develop categorically, splitting the ideas into major categories? In other words, we're asking questions about how is this organized, and does that organization serve the speaker or the retort as they produce this text? From there, we can move into kind of a basic assessment of logos as we look at some of the supporting material offered by the speaker or the advocate. So ask yourself, what kind of evidence does this source use? Do they use personal narratives? Do they use statistics? Do they use expert testimony? As we do that, we're starting to ask questions like, how is this text trying to develop its logical appeal or its logos? We also might ask questions about the quality of that evidence. Is this evidence appropriate for the audience? Is there enough evidence to support the claims being developed by the advocate? And then number 7, we have other strategies, and this is just kind of a catch-all. So if you notice something going on in your text that doesn't really fit into those 6 things, but you believe it's really important for how the speaker or the advocate is trying to persuade an audience, then you mark that down here. So this step of other strategies really is to encourage yourself to think all the different ways that this text might be influencing somebody. And so our first step of our study is all about going through paragraph by paragraph, asking questions about our text, such as what is the persona? What is the purpose? What are the supporting materials that are being used? Are there other strategies that are going on that help persuade the audience? Now, note that most of these things are actually the things that you should also be thinking about as you develop a text. So if you're writing a speech, you're probably thinking about all of these things as well: my organizational structure, my argument, my supporting materials. And so you can use these terms both to help you analyze a speech, but also craft a speech as well. After we complete that first step of really looking at our text, going through those 7 questions, we can now turn to introducing the context. And this is going to help us connect the surrounding of the text to the text itself in a way that can help us start an initial evaluation of that text. And so as we're thinking about the context, we're asking things like, what are the exigencies? What are the imperfections that is bringing forth this text as a response? Who is the audience? What are the constraints and opportunities? What's the occasion? Now, asking these questions can help us start evaluating our text. And here's maybe a quick example to illustrate how. Imagine that a speaker referred to their audience as concerned parents throughout the entirety of the speech. But then when you go study that context, you realize that speech was given to students and none of them were parents. We have an initial evaluation of it does not make sense that the speaker would adopt that way of viewing the audience for their audience, given who the audience actually was. So questions we might ask are, does this persona actually help the speaker and help the speaker connect with their audience? Or we might ask questions like, does this persona create separation from the audience in a way that might undermine the speaker's goal? And so we go through each of the things that we noticed, each of the quotes that we pulled out as important, and connect those quotes back to the larger context. After that, we move on to step 3, which is our initial evaluation of the entirety of the text and our effort to brainstorm what kinds of rhetorical theories we can use to help us understand the text more deeply. So after step 2, we should have a good chunk of analysis that is connecting our text with the context. And as we look through all of those different arguments and assessments we made, we can come up with a more holistic evaluation of what's going on in terms of how well that text is responding to the context. So we might conclude that most of the speech did a good job responding to the context, or that the speech was totally off and did not respond to the main exigencies or overcome a key constraint. Whatever our evaluation is, we have this initial evaluation moment. From there, we move on to think, how can I borrow from rhetorical theory to help craft a stronger argument about what I'm seeing going on here in this text? For example, if your text is very narrative-based, you might look at scholarship about narrative to see what people have said about what makes a persuasive or successful narrative. Likewise, if you see a bunch of metaphors or stylistic devices, you might look up the scholarship on metaphors. Now, those 3 steps are the basic roadmap we can use when we're starting an analysis. No matter what your text is, that can be a good way to start understanding and evaluating that text more deeply. And now that we know those 3 steps, let's look at an example of developing this initial analysis, and that will be our next lesson, our lesson where we look at Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail.